kicked off. So good morning, everyone. I'm really glad that you all could join us today for our webinar. We've got, it looks right now, like 34 people on screen, so that's great. So I appreciate you all taking your time to join us today and learn a little bit more about what it is we're doing here. So again, I want to let you know that we are recording this webinar. So in the next day or two, you will be able to access this on our website, and we'll show you where that is as we go through this presentation. We will also put these slides up as well, and that will be there up on the website along with the recording. If you want to go ahead and network and see who is all on the chat, that's great. I think it's a good way to see who is all on there, and if anybody else has any questions or somebody you might ask questions of. But we will be using that chat function. If you want to ask questions, you can put those in the chat. We will also have some time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you may have. So we'll be monitoring the chat here. But you can also save up your questions until the end as well. So I just quickly want to introduce who we have here in the room as part of our River Basin Planning team. So again, my name is Jody Pring, and I'm the supervisor of the River Basin Planning section. And I've got Mike Robertson with me here in the room and Mabel Jones. You can't see her because she's over off to the side navigating all the slides. Also on the phone with us is Tony Bergantino, and he's with our Water Resources Data System, and he's really the mechanics behind all this, the wizard that keeps us all going. So we appreciate Tony being on our team. I also wanted to let you all know that we have Peter Gamberg and Amber Knapp on the phone with us as well, and they're the Esri reps for this area. So I really appreciate them taking time out of their super busy schedules to join us today, and avail yourself of them being on here. They can answer a lot of the more technical questions if you've got questions about your software and that type of thing. So I would encourage you to ask questions of that, and we don't mind that at all, because that's part of what this is all about, is to get everybody up and going and standards that we're wanting to implement here in the office. So I just wanted to kick it off today by just letting you know we're going to talk about our data collection and standardization efforts. Some of you have been through this process before, some of you have not. We have changed some things since the last time we've done this. We try to continue to improve our processes as we go through this and learn as we go, and learn from you, learn about things that worked and the things that didn't work. And we instituted this methodology to really bring some standardization to all of the information that's collected through our water development projects. So this webinar will give you information on what to expect, introduce you to some tools, and really help you meet those expectations. So for those of you who have attended a previous seminar, we do have a new version of the GIS Standards Tech Memo and all the templates out on our website. So please be sure that you get rid of the things that you had before and go and upload those new templates and take a look at that new tech memo. Mike did a really, really good job on the tech memo, and I think it's a lot more, it's a lot easier to read. I think it does a better job of explaining what we need, and it does a really good job of referencing the different sections that you need to go to find what you want. So, and then Mabel's really worked hard on the templates, and I think those are better put together. Everything matches, all the names match. So these two have really worked hard to try to make everything uniform. And then Tony's been great about getting all that up on the website for us so that you guys have access to that as soon as we get done with this standards, because I know you all will be chomping at the bit to get started on all this. So again, what we're going to go over today is just kind of where we started, this path that we are taking. And then Mike and Mabel will get into the how to do this. So what I'd like to ask of you as we're going through this webinar is just to really keep in mind your particular project and how you're going to implement these standards in your project. And then, of course, at the end, we'll open it up for any questions or comments from all of you. So as most of you know, we began this effort in 2016, looking for a better way to manage the large sets of GIS data that come into our office. So we started by working with a multidisciplinary steering group and to find some of the core data that our agency as well as other agencies need across the state. So these core data sets are important because they assist us in building these statewide data sets, and that's really what our end goal is. Because our office needs to understand water use, water supply, and project feasibility, a water GIS is key to this. And these standardized data layers are going to help us do just that. So as in all things, implementation of a project like this has led us to update a lot of different things. So as I mentioned, please be sure that you have the latest copy of the tech memo, which is now version 3, as well as the templates, and they're also version 3. So just be sure you've got the most current copies of those. The GIS standards are applicable to all types of planning projects, and we'll go through those individually as we get into the webinar. And we want you to be able to maximize the use of this data. So please be sure to ask any questions that you have as we're going through this presentation and you're going through your project. So again, our goal is really to improve these statewide water data information. And then that helps us provide a more sustainable management of the resource. It also helps us identify public entities that are managing their water use, help them with their water infrastructure. And as you know, this has become, aging infrastructure has become quite a topic. It's one of the interim topics for the Joint Agriculture Committee that met yesterday and is meeting again today. And one of the things they asked us is, what do we know about aging infrastructure? So Brandon did have the opportunity to tell them that we have implemented this. So I want you guys to know that you're a really important part of trying to help us get that groundwork laid for those statewide layers, because that's going to become very, very important in helping us identify these infrastructure across the state and then aging infrastructure across the state. So thank you in advance for helping us do this. And I'm hoping too, as we get more and more down the road, that we have these data sets available that will help you guys so that you won't have to work so hard, and we'll be able to pass these back and forth through an SDE server. That's really what our main goal is. So, all right, so that's the introduction I have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mabel and Mike because they're really the brains of the group, and we're going to let them tell you guys all about this.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mabel Jones, and thank you, Jody, for providing the context for our water data modernization efforts. So in the next section, I will just provide an overview of spatial data requirements per your contract specifications, talk about what core data is, also known as the data required for your project, talk about, show you the resources that are available to ensure that your core data sets meet Office standards. And so from here, I want to just jump right into what most people care about most. That is how to ensure that your data collected during your project is compiled so that deliverables provide the data in the correct format the first time. As Jody mentioned, over the past few months, we have adapted to our first round of contract submittals by updating the template standards and other documentation to ensure an increase in clarity and consistency. So the spatial data requirements are outlined in your contract specifications. They're out under project requirements under C2B. We recommend that the contract be shared with the individuals on the consultant team who will be involved in developing the GIS if the project principals have not done so already. So under C2B, under section I, there's a section on feature mapping. This discusses where the consultant shall acquire the appropriate geodatabase templates for feature mapping from the Geospatial Hub prior to completing GIS work. We recommend that you download and use the templates early on to avoid having to retrofit your data into the required format for your final deliverables. And then also confirm your GIS plan with your Wyoming Water Development Office project manager. So basically there's 5 geodatabase templates that are available, and they will be specific to your project type, whether it's a watershed study, master plan, or in-stream flow study. The templates provide the organization and naming requirements for all the feature classes, tables, and the required attributes that you will be needing to populate. The contract also talks about core data and auxiliary data. Core data are those features which fit into one of the feature classes in the Geodatabase templates. Whether you have created the data through on-the-ground collection or are digitizing or acquiring it from another source, such as a previous Water Development Office project. All of the core data needs to be loaded into the Geodatabase template and attributed according to the GIS standards. Core data do have a subset of fields that are required for all feature classes. That includes the contract number, the primary consultant, the date modified, and accuracy. So to find your contract number, that's on the first page of your contract in the header, and it's highlighted with a gold square here. It begins with 2 numbers and then has an SCS and then is followed by a series of numbers. So the contract number is not to be confused with the RN number that's on each page of your contract. Your contract also talks about auxiliary data sets. This includes features which do not fit within one of the feature classes in the Geodatabase templates. This could include things like photos, possibly seepage areas, or line work or polygons for potential projects, since potential projects are delivered as a point layer. The auxiliary data can be linked to the templates or managed separately as needed for project completion. Auxiliary data sets can be submitted as shape files, and metadata is required. So section 2 of the scope of services talks about formats and standards. Here we indicate that metadata is required, and we'll talk more about metadata later in the presentation. And then the coordinate system is also defined, and specifically as GCS North American 1983. And then finally, section 3 of the project requirements discusses maps that are developed as part of the project. And so the maps that are developed should be provided as Esri ArcGIS MXD files, saved with relative path names to the data sources so that the maps can be easily recreated. We do want you to keep in mind the version of ArcGIS that your sponsor uses when saving the MXD files so that these are compatible with what is available in the sponsor's office. Again, just please look at the contract language before you submit your GIS deliverables. So Jody mentioned our goal of modernizing and standardizing the data which is being collected as part of water development projects. And as we reviewed the contract language, the concept of core data sets came up. The framework for the core data sets in the templates is based on the common sets of data gathered during Water Development Office projects. The framework identified 4 categories of data or 4 different data sets: assessment, hydrology, water projects, and water systems. The assessment data sets organizes key data related to water use, changes over time, and ground conditions. Included here are mapping of irrigated lands and Rosgan assessments. The hydrology data set contains information on both measured and modeled streamflow data. Water projects data set includes study area boundaries and tracks potential projects as points and their size, costs, and how these potential projects fit into our funding programs. And then finally, water systems data sets consist of information on the network to distribute water and includes both the built environment of conveyances and structures, as well as the water rights associated with water use. So basically, only a subset of these core feature data sets will be required for your specific project. And this will be described in a few minutes when we share how to access the templates. So basically, the contract lays out what to do for your GIS project, and we have developed several resources which provide how to do it. So it not only serves your project needs, but has increased utility beyond your project when it becomes part of a statewide water development data set. So much of what you will need to know about data delivery and development can be found in the GIS Standards Technical Memo. When you begin your projects or you get stuck using the tools or looking for templates, this is a really great place to start. As Jody mentioned, this is the new 2020 version, so you'll want to grab this off the web page, even if you have worked with the standards previously, as some of the fields have changed as well as other standards. So basically, in reviewing the table of contents, you can see that it includes an introduction. This includes 9 tips for working with the GIS standards. The metadata and coordinate systems are described and detailed in the technical memo. It also includes information on the templates, tools, and base layers. The Geodatabase templates provides download instructions for the map packages for your projects. And there is also discussion on utilizing the e-permit, place of use, and point of diversion conversion tools. These are 2 data sets that we're currently populating statewide, and your office project manager can help you get this pre-populated data set if it is needed for your project. This section does help understand how the data set is developed from e-permit and how to use it and how to update the data set if necessary. And then the technical memo also describes the base layers to be used to provide a consistent base for developing core data sets, such as the NHD, flow lines, and stream names. So the bulk of the standards describe the data model, core GIS data sets, and provide detail on the types of GIS features that are normally collected through Development Office projects under the Feature Mapping and Attributes section. And then finally, over half of the document includes appendices of helpful reference materials. Appendix A will be very important for setting up your project GIS. This appendix includes all of the domains that are in the geodatabases and includes the different attributes for those domains and describes those. So that will be a good appendix to refer to. Appendix B was provided by the State Engineer's Office and includes guidelines for using the e-permit database to explore water rights records. The guidelines include tips for searching and then definitions of terms as well as permit code modifiers. Appendix C provides detailed instructions for downloading the e-permit point of use and point of diversion data. It describes a conversion tool that takes Excel data from e-permit and plots points of use to the quarter-quarter section and point of diversion to latitude, longitude. And then finally, Appendix D provides instructions for developing linking fields between conveyances and structures. So again, this document is designed to help you provide the deliverables based on your specific type of project. So all of the templates, tools, and training materials are available by navigating to the URL here or selecting GIS data and standards from the office's homepage. So this is a screenshot of the WWDC GIS standards homepage. And I'll just go through the different blocks of resources that are shown here. So the first block of resources on our webpage include links to, the first item is the GIS standards technical memo. So this is where you can grab that as a PDF. The second piece on our website includes the geodatabase diagram, which I will talk about in the next slide. Jody had mentioned that we are recording this webinar, and then we will also be posting the slides on our website, and they will be available in this section of the site. You also have access to the GIS framework plan completed in 2018, and this provides the foundation for what we're doing for developing our water GIS. Included is background data, data gap analysis, and recommendations for implementation. And it's a good document that we refer to often in the office to keep us on track for modernizing our GIS. And then all of our past presentations and standard documents are also available on this first block on our website. I do want to circle back to and talk about the geodatabase diagram. It can be downloaded as a PDF or printed on large format paper, depending on your preference. So here's the diagram. It looks a little bit like alphabet soup, but it's really, really good alphabet soup. It's like the kind your grandma might have made. But the geodatabase diagram really provides the one place where you can see the feature classes and all of the different tables at a glance. In the diagram, the feature classes are all shown in blue, and the associated tables are shown in gold. The feature classes list all of the fields that are in the feature class, and then to the right of those, it provides field definitions. It also, you might not be able to see it on your screen, but you might be able to see the little red language on there, and that describes those fields which are included as domains. And then also the linkages between the different tables and the feature classes are shown here as well. So good document to have on your desktop as you're working on this, or print off a large format copy. So the next block of information on our website that I wanted to talk about includes access to the Geodatabase templates. So the diagram from the web page with the yellow arrow or the gold arrow is pointing to probably looks familiar from a previous slide. And this shows the feature classes. And this is the database structure with the 4 categories of data or feature data sets with the core feature classes listed below. On the right side of the screen or the slide is a screenshot of the geodatabase structure in ArcCatalog, which includes all of the core feature classes. The geodatabase shown here is a master, which includes all feature classes. Again, not all projects will include or require all the listed feature classes. So here is an example of the feature classes that are required for an irrigation district master plan. In section 4.3 of the GIS Standards Technical Memo, a table similar to this is available for each of the different project types. And so as you can see for this irrigation district master plan, the feature classes that are required, let's see, there's 2, 4, 8 of those are listed on the left, and there's a description of each of the feature classes, and then there's notes to help you populate those feature classes. And tables like this, as I mentioned, are available for all of the different study types. Feature classes that are required for all projects include study area, potential projects, place of use, and conveyances. And so again, the irrigation district master plans require 8 of the feature classes. River basin planning and watershed studies include 10 of the feature classes, and drinking water master plan and in-stream flow studies include 6 of the different feature classes from those core data sets. Okay. So tip 2 in the technical memo is to use the project-specific templates. And on the right side of the screen, there is a listing of the map packages for each of the different type of projects. So that your template from the extracted map package will only include the feature classes which are relevant to your project. And whenever you download the map packages, there are 2 different ways to open those. One way is to double-click the map package, and the map package will automatically default and extract itself to your C users folder, and then automatically open in ArcMap. Packages are compatible with ArcMap 10.8 in previous versions. You can also run the extract package tool in Arc Toolbox from either ArcMap or ArcCatalog. This allows the map package to be extracted to a user-defined location versus the default location under C users. So the paths and instructions for getting to the map packages are on page 8 of the technical memo. So the final portion of our web page provides links to the common base data sets that you will be using in your projects. These data are intended to be used as needed in order to provide a consistent base for the development of the core data sets. Included are boundaries, stream and water bodies from the NHD, stream names, and division and district boundaries from the Wyoming State Engineer's Office. These data sets have been updated for this year's. And then the e-permit tools are also provided here if you want to dig into those. The ArcGIS tools currently include the e-permit GIS conversion tool and the associated public land survey system layers. So implementation of the standards has brought to light where we can fine-tune our processes. We're excited to be building the statewide data sets with your project data and also by going out and mining previous project data. We have learned a lot in working with the incoming data sets, and I now will pass this off to Mike Robertson, who will share some of the things we have learned.
Okay, thanks, Mabel. So at this point, you've heard about the resources that we prepared for you to generate deliverables that meet our standards. In the past, there's also been similar webinars like we're doing today and similar resources, but yet we've still seen a disconnect with many of the GIS data sets that we've received, and most have needed at least some corrections and resubmittals. And of course, that's certainly due in part to a large part due to the standards implementation being new for everybody, including consultants and our own project managers. But maybe we could have emphasized some areas better, and that's what we're hoping to try and accomplish today with this webinar. So with some experience under our belts now, we've gone ahead and updated the standards technical memorandum that you've heard about already today, the geodatabase diagram, and even some attributes in the master geodatabase, so that will hopefully improve the clarity of our expectations. So I'm going to focus on this section of the webinar on some areas where we saw some confusion in the recent GIS data submittals. So you've already heard that we have 9 tips right at the front of the standards technical memo, and those are really valuable to help you avoid any problems. We've emphasized those over the course of the webinar, Mabel has. I'm not going to go through them now individually again, but I did want to highlight the one here using the correct project template. And we recommend that you start with the template when you're creating new data rather than planning to load data in from your own customized project later in the process. You can certainly do it either way, but I think that it would provide a lot fewer roadblocks and headaches if you just start with the template from the get-go. If we were to have a 10th tip, it would certainly be about communication. We think it's really valuable to check in with your project manager early and often, help eliminate surprises at the end of the project, and let them know that you're comfortable with these standards and expectations. Again, nobody on either side wants to see the data returned for corrections, especially at the end of the project. And also, if by chance you have a change in personnel that works on, has GIS responsibilities over the course of the project, the new person can always review this recorded webinar and the documents that we provided, but also we're happy to work through any questions one-on-one with a new person to get them up to speed as needed. So when you turn in GIS data, it's going to come to one of our project managers, and they're going to pull out this checklist similar to what you see on the screen here to fill out. And the major points they're going to focus on is first, does the deliverable have core data sets specific to the project types? In other words, did you use the correct template when you started? Now, not every feature class in the template is going to be populated, but most of them should be. Second, they're going to be looking at attributes. Are they all filled in? Again, we're probably not going to be populating every single attribute that's in the templates, but most of them should have data associated with them. And you should only be turning in your core data sets, feature classes should only include the attributes that were in the template, not any extra ones. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. There are also domains, make sure those are filled out correctly. So next up is metadata, is all of the metadata included? And I'm going to talk some more about that on the next slide. And then finally, although we provide the templates as a map packages, we actually prefer that the deliverables not be returned in that format. And the reason is, it's easier to work with a geodatabase. So this is going to come directly to one of our project managers first. And so they have varying GIS experience. And so when you have a map package, it involves a couple of steps. And we wanted to try and avoid some of that confusion and just have them work and look at the geodatabase right off the bat. So hopefully by now we've impressed upon you about how important metadata is. Anyone that works with GIS knows how frustrating it is to find or get a data set with no metadata and trying to figure out whether it's usable or not. Again, we aren't requiring full FGDC compliant metadata, just the 5 sections that are in the ArcGIS item description format. And there's several places where you can find out exactly what we're looking for. So you can start with section 2.1 of our tech memo, where you'll find the table right here that outlines each section and the components that go into that section. There's also a detailed example on our tech memo on page 5 that's filled out with hypothetical data so that it can give you a better sense of what goes where. We've also carried that over into the templates themselves by including both the prompts of what to include. You'll find those in brackets within the pre-populated metadata, and then also some of the example text, which will be similar to what you see in that example in the tech memo. And I did want to emphasize too that we do want the metadata incorporated into the GIS layers where we have the pre-populated text already and not as a standalone XML document. So if you take a look at the sections we're talking about, if you look at tags, tags are largely pre-populated, gone through and added quite a few that we think were appropriate for each of the individual feature classes, but you're welcome to and encouraged to add more if it's appropriate or needed. At the bottom, the use limitations, we have a default language in there that pretty much should be all you need, but again, you're welcome to add any additional language that you think is necessary. The credits is straightforward, and so really we're just talking about the summary and description that might require a bit more work on your part to populate those. But still, with all of the prompts and the example text that we've thrown in there, we hope that that should be pretty straightforward. And I do want to point out the yellow highlighted piece. So in the description section, we want you to spell out any data attributes that you've added to linked tables, including a description of the attributes and then especially a definition if you've used any coded values. We asked for this before, but again, it hasn't been done correctly so far, so we wanted to highlight that a bit more and update the table and example to show it more clearly. So what do you do if you get data from another source and it doesn't have any metadata? Well, first, you need to make sure you can trust the accuracy of the data that you're looking at. The whole point of metadata is really to ensure validity, and so you'll need to take time to verify that what you're working with is appropriate and for turning in over here to our office. And if you've gone through the effort to try and find metadata and still can't find any, then go ahead and at least explain where you got it from, when you got the data, and then acknowledge that despite your best efforts, you weren't able to track down any other metadata for it. Too many of our data sets have come into our office with very little or no metadata. And so we took time to build these examples in every feature class and table. So the prompts are right there when you go to fill it out. And I've heard that it feels repetitive, which is understandable. It does seem repetitive, but remember, these feature classes and tables are likely to be separated at some point in the future, and so they won't be shared as a bundled package. And so it's important for each piece to carry the appropriate metadata to trace back the history of the data. So metadata is not just for feature classes and tables. We also want metadata embedded in the data itself. So there are feature class attributes that are required for each of the individual feature classes and tables. So it usually includes 4 fields. Sometimes the horizontal accuracy is not required. If it's not required, it won't be in the template. So anytime you see these fields, they do need to be populated. It's not optional. And based on what we've gotten back from recent data sets, I wanted to give some attention to this particular point. So you saw earlier in the presentation, Mabel pointed out where the contract ID number is. That should be one value that'll go into all of your all the data sets that you return to us. Contractor is intended to be the firm who creates and or edits the feature, whether it's the prime or a subcontractor. creation edit date. So we opted not to maintain both a creator and an editor field. The creator will populate these fields initially with the entire feature class or table, but then at a later date, if someone comes along and makes changes, they will change those fields to reflect the edit date for the new condition. And then that's what will be persistent in that data set. Horizontal accuracy is a set up with a domain. It's a coded value domain, so be sure to review the tech memo for which code is appropriate for the feature, for each feature. So one of our tips is to assign an edit date to only those features that you change. And a good way to do this without having to manually change each individual record is to enable editor tracking. So many of you are probably familiar with this feature, and it's a great way to ensure that you can update both the contractor field, which you could set as being your editor field, and then also the creation edit date field will be updated. But I just want to caution you to be careful using this feature. Anytime you make a wholesale change to the entire layer, for instance, if you copy and paste, you're going to update those two fields for all of the features simultaneously. So I recommend keeping the editor tracking off until you begin to make changes to the individual features. Turn it on temporarily and then back off when you're done with the changes. So this will help us clearly distinguish individual features that have actually been changed in some way from those that have just been changed as a result of a basic processing action. Okay, so ideally, we have created and identified the exact correct attributes in each feature class and table, and so you can just quickly load the data from your project one-to-one right into the appropriate attributes. But the reality is you're likely to have some data that doesn't match up exactly with the attributes in the template. And it's become obvious from the recent deliverables that there's some uncertainty about how to handle this. There's a tendency just to tack on those extra attributes right to the end of the feature class, but we don't want you to do that. Extra data attributes are handled differently depending on whether you're working with core data or auxiliary data layers. So if you're working with data that clearly don't fit into one of the core data sets that we defined, then you're working with auxiliary data. These don't have any template layers at all, so all of the data essentially fall outside of our data attributes that we predefined. The feature classes and tables will follow whatever format you feel is best suited to organize these data. As far as how you submit them, you have some options. You can create a separate feature class with whatever name you choose and include it in the same Geodatabase with all the core data sets. And the benefit of that, of course, is that you have the same coordinate system, and then there's many other benefits that come with working within geodatabases. Be sure to populate the metadata for the auxiliary data. It's still required. And then alternatively, you can keep that data separate and submit it as a distinct geodatabase or even as standalone shapefiles. But again, remember to populate the metadata. So with core data sets, the requirements are more specific. Do not include the extra attributes in the feature classes. So that's established that already. If the attributes are not in the feature class, it's possible that they are supposed to go in one of the pre-designed data tables. So check the tables first. And again, that geodatabase diagram is really your best bet here. If you don't see an appropriate attribute already incorporated into the feature class or an existing table that matches your data, then you'll need to go ahead and create a project-specific table to house these data. So you'll see that here with the arrow on the right in the catalog tree, and you'll need to make sure to populate the attribute that enables the join. So here we have, we call it just generically a join ID in the table because this table could be used to attach data to any feature class. You don't have to create a relationship class with this table, but you do need to ensure that the join works correctly to link the data to the correct features in the back end of the feature class. And again, remember to populate the metadata for this table, including information on attributes and any coded values that you may have used. So here's an example of that in action. We have up at the top a feature class, the WWDO conveyance, and the unique ID for that feature class is convey ID. And then we have added a set of data attributes that are not already included. So these are some extra data attributes, and we've linked them through the convey ID field into a project-specific table. So I know it's a bit more work to organize the data this way, but it's also really important that our template feature classes be maintained in the format that we created, so that they can be easily incorporated into the master geodatabase. And we do want to be able to retain and include all the important data, including attributes that we didn't anticipate when we designed the schema. And so this is a good way to keep all the data attributes associated with the feature classes and facilitate data management on the back end. And I think I forgot to mention earlier that one of the things that historically we've seen is that prior to setting up the standards, a lot of data was retained in reports, and not very much data was associated with individual features in the GIS. So we'd get feature classes, and we'd get data sets, GIS spatial layers, but very little data was associated with it. And so we're trying to enable that as much as possible through this process, to link all of that data directly, so that the data has an opportunity to live beyond the project and to be more useful on the grand scheme. So we're trying to build in as many functions as we can to capture those data components within the GIS. I wanted to touch briefly also on naming. There was a bit of confusion here. You may want to go ahead and alter the names of the feature classes and tables within the templates to match your project naming conventions. But we actually want to see the feature classes and tables keep the same names as in your deliverables as they are in the template. So a couple of examples here. We have a feature class WWDO conveyance and a table conveyance names. In the template, that's how they're named. In the your GIS deliverable, we'd like to see them named the same way. So the one exception is when you're working with a project-specific table, as we talked about in the last couple of slides. And so in that situation, you do need to rename it. It's given a generic name, again, because it could be used with connecting data to any feature class. And so you'll have to go ahead and rename it using whatever. So you have to put the prefix on there. In this case, WS refers to the water systems, so that tells us that it's a table that goes within the water systems feature data set. You give it the table a name, including what is included. In this case, we put photos. And then also you'll put your project name, and then the date would just be the year that you completed the project. I think I covered everything. Yeah, got off script there. All right, so next up is talking about how to populate the WWDO STRID field. So this, for reference, this is really the unique identifier for the structures layer. So it's kind of structures ID, you can think about it. So some of the other feature classes do have ready-made unique identifiers already built into the data. The NHD reach code would be a good example of that. But structures didn't have that, and so we needed to create a new ID field to be the unique identifier for individual features. The same thing is true of the conveyances, and so for that we use the convey ID as the unique identifier. So if you read last year's tech memo, you'll see that the creating these fields was pretty cumbersome. So we had a lot of individual components, and you had to really it took quite a bit of effort to figure out how to identify individual identifiers. So we decided that was a bit cumbersome, particularly for large projects. That was when we ran into the problem. So we decided to simplify it pretty drastically, and now we're just going to work with a sequential number as your identifier. It's a permanent identifier for each of these data sets. But the one side effect of that is that if we have several projects working simultaneously, creating features where they're adding unique identifiers, it would be difficult to coordinate and prevent assigning duplicate numbers. So the previous method would have prevented that, but so we're going to have to come up. We had to come up with a way to prevent creating these accidental duplicates. So what we're going to do is have you not actually assign the permanent ID value as you are working on your project. We're going to have you assign a temporary ID value. It still needs to be unique to that feature, and connect to any data so that you have the one-to-one connection with your unique ID. But your temporary value is going to be the contract ID and then a sequence beginning with 001. So you just go ahead and assign those sequentially as you create new features. And then on the back end, when it comes to us, we, or more likely words, are going to end up taking those and turning them into permanent IDs. And so again, they are permanent IDs. So once it's assigned for a feature, then it won't be changed. So if you're working with a data set that includes structures or conveyances that already have IDs, then you don't need to make up new ID values for those. Okay, and then I just wanted to go through a few miscellaneous items to tack on here. I think Mabel alluded to this earlier, but we did have a situation recently where a GIS project was delivered in the most recent desktop version, which makes sense. That's probably what you're likely to do. But we found out that the sponsor was using a different version, an earlier version. So be sure to inquire with the sponsor and find out what they're using so that you can submit the GIS both in the current version and then also in whatever version they can use. Mabel also mentioned this, potential projects are set up as points. So if you're working with line features, you'll need to go ahead and create a point layer using the first point in each line. And if you're working with polygons as potential projects, go ahead and create a point layer from the centroids. We do want you to submit the original data as well, but for the compilation purposes in the master geodatabase, we want one statewide point layer that we can use to search for individual potential projects. Okay, we also had a project data set come in last round that included individual feature classes for several different structure types. And that's probably how the data was created originally, but again, for loading data into our master geodatabase, we want to be able to see all of the data of a similar type consolidated into one feature class and then use the attributes to actually distinguish the different types. And then next is remembering that the contract language provides clear guidance on what deliverables are required, such as map files for each map and other details. So again, be sure to review this carefully. And then finally, I wanted to add in one last reminder about the geodatabase diagram. It's pretty complex and maybe looks intimidating, but the reality is it is the best place to see descriptions for each attribute and of the feature classes and tables. So for instance, if you aren't sure what the status attribute refers to, and you need more information about that, go to the diagram for a description, and that'll help you put the right data in the right places. Okay, so to wrap it up, at this point, I just want to say thanks for participating in the seminar. We hope that it will help you generate and submit deliverables correctly the first time. During the course of the webinar, we reviewed a little bit about the standards development, why we've decided to implement this, and also talked a lot about the resources that we've created for you to reference as you are preparing your GIS deliverables. We've explained the contract requirements and what our project managers will be looking for when they get their checklist. For instance, detailed metadata. We've explained where to go to get all of this great information, including the template that you need to get started. And we talked a little bit about some of the issues we've run across with previous deliverables to hopefully avoid similar situations going forward. So we'll be happy to answer questions that you submit either via chat, or in a minute, we'll give you a chance to unmute yourself and you can ask questions that way. And if you find you're having trouble asking a question, you think you're still muted, use *6 as a way to unmute yourself if that's a problem.
Yeah, so thanks, Mike and Mabel. Again, as you guys can see, they're really the brains behind this operation, and I'm super happy to have them on board. And also Tony. So I don't want to neglect Tony. He's integral in this effort that we've gone into. So as you can see on this slide, there's contact information there for Mabel, Mike, and Tony. So please take advantage of that. We are happy to answer any questions that you have. So anytime that you feel like you're at a roadblock, please do not hesitate to contact your project manager or Mike or Mabel. They both have extensive, and Tony, extensive GIS experience and are happy to help out, because if we can help out on the front end, that just means less problems for all of us on the back end. And I also wanted to mention too that if you're looking for any previous information, any previous data that we have on reports, so maybe you're doing a master plan and one's been done 10 years earlier, Tony is a great resource for all of that information. So be sure and give him a call or email him, and he can try to help you find where that information is. So with that, I think we'll close our presentation. Again, I really appreciate you all being here. I know this is a lot of information. It's not always the most exciting thing. It's exciting for us, but sometimes it's not exciting for others. So I really appreciate you all taking time to be here today and learn about what we're doing here. So with that, if there's any questions, again, Mabel's monitoring the chat here, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, we'll be happy to try to answer those.
Okay, we do have. So we have a question. In water utility systems, we use ArcGIS Pro and deployment tools for data models from ESRI. Would you want the Pro package as well? Also, would you prefer this as a separate geodatabase or included in the one following the standards? So, you know, that I think that's an area where, and whenever Jody sent out the invitation for the webinar, we did ask the different consulting teams what versions of ArcGIS they're currently using, and we recognize that probably developing these tools in Pro and looking at that as we go forward in the future is something that we need to do in developing the standards. I'm not sure at this point if we would want everything in the Pro package.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I think probably just for simplicity now, if we can get everything in the current templates and everything, that would probably be the best bet. But Trip, we recognize that we need to address working with Pro, because more and more people are going with it, and even internally in the office, we're starting to use Pro more and more exclusively.
Right.
So that will probably be a change that would come about in next year.
Yeah, I think so.
Asking for some of these things in Pro, but I think for now, we just like to keep everything in the Geodatabase templates.
Great. And then we had a question from Brian Thompson. What level of Esri licensing is required to accomplish everything in the tech memo?
We did set that up to work with basic licensing. So, you know, we originally built in relationship classes and some features that require higher level licensing, but we realized that that wasn't going to be realistic to expect that anyone or everyone would have higher level. So we went back and reworked it so that basic licensing will be sufficient to do everything in the tech memo.
Great. Any other questions? And please remember also that we have our Esri reps on the phone. So if you guys have any questions about the software or licensing or anything like that, Peter and Amber are on the phone, and I know would be happy to try to answer those questions or get with you offline if you've got any software questions. So really, we answered all of your questions? Come on, you guys and gals. Well, I know a lot of this is a lot to digest. So again, once you have the opportunity to get into this with your particular project, please don't hesitate, like I said, to get a hold of your project manager or get a hold of Mike or Mabel or Tony. They're happy to help walk you through all of this. And again, I just want to thank all of you for being here. I know this is a lot, and I know it's something different that in the last couple of years our office has required and is now a little bit new for all of you. But what I want you all to remember is you're really helping us to set that foundation for all of this great information that's going to be used in the future. We're kind of embarking on a brave new world here, and you all are taking that journey with us, and we really appreciate that because, again, as I emphasized, one of the big things that is coming up and really looming in front of our office is aging infrastructure. And it's hard for us to know where to start when we don't even know where that structure is. So once we can start building those statewide data sets and we have that information, that's really going to open up so many doors. And as we get further down the line, and you all as consultants are contributing more and more and more to this master geodatabase, it's just going to grow and grow and grow. So again, to me, it's exciting to be on the front end of it. It's also a little daunting because, of course, then you look at it and you think, oh, wow, isn't this great? I wish we had more. But it takes baby steps. And again, I appreciate all of you taking this journey with us because I really think that we're headed in a really, really good direction. So again, any help that you need, we are happy to do that. Your project managers are happy to help. We've got our great resources with our Esri reps that they're happy to help. So again, I guess with that, if we have
a couple more questions.
We do have a couple more questions. Good. I knew if I talked long enough that you guys would come up with some. Okay. So we have a question that how are you wanting to handle database attachments?
Database attachments. I guess I'm not.
No, if that's related data, related tables, or
Right.
would be auxiliary data.
Yeah.
Is it Jerome? Do you want to potentially unmute yourself and maybe we could elaborate on that a little bit? If you're shy, I understand too. Maybe you don't want to.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just finding the unmute button.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I apologize. That was kind of a vague question. If we set up the template